They say that every soul carries a flame, but in Sagittarius, that flame becomes a torch held high, a light that refuses to be confined. Sagittarius is the fire of the seeker, the restless truth-bearer of the zodiac, born not to stand still but to move, to question, to expand. When this sign rises, the spirit awakens to wander, to chase horizons that never end, to burn for meaning in a world too easily satisfied with surface. This is not the easy warmth of comfort, but the sacred blaze of discovery, the fire that consumes illusion, so that wisdom may be revealed. The truth about Sagittarius is not found in cliches of adventure or reckless freedom. It is far deeper, more ancient. Sagittarius is the bridge between earth and sky, between animal instinct and divine vision. Half human, half horse. It is the centaur archer aiming toward the heavens, a creature of wild body and holy mind. This sign remembers what most have forgotten, that to live fully is to keep seeking, to let curiosity become prayer, to let experience shape belief. The Sagittarian spirit cannot be tamed because it was never born to belong to one place or one truth. It belongs to the infinite, and its journey is the act of remembering that. This is the fire that pushes the soul to move across lands, through books, into faiths, philosophies, and dreams. It is not mere wanderlust, it is hunger for revelation. Sagittarius travels not to escape but to find. Every road is a sermon, every sunrise a teacher. For this sign, life is the temple, and learning is the ritual. Its wisdom is not inherited. It is earned in the dust of the path, in the risk of asking questions that unsettle comfort. Sagittarius does not worship certainty. It worships wonder. It trusts that meaning is not a fixed thing to be possessed, but a horizon that keeps moving, calling the spirit onward. To stand still for too long suffocates the Sagittarian fire. It must breathe new air, see new stars, break the walls of familiarity. Yet in this restless drive lies its lesson that truth is not only out there, but within. The same flame that pushes outward must one day turn inward, illuminating the hidden corners of the self. The archer's arrow is not meant to pierce the heavens, but to find the divine within the heart. Only when Sagittarius learns this can its freedom become wisdom, its movement become meaning. This sign is ruled by Jupiter, the planet of expansion, fortune, and cosmic law. Under Jupiter's influence, Sagittarius feels guided by a force larger than logic. Something that whispers, there is more to learn, more to see, more to understand. Faith is the compass. Optimism is the wind. Even in loss, the Sagittarian heart believes there is purpose, that each ending is a beginning, that every wrong turn leads to revelation. This is not blind positivity, but sacred trust in the unfolding pattern of life. Yet Sagittarius also carries the shadow of its light. When its fire burns without direction, it can scorch rather than illuminate. The same freedom that brings enlightenment can lead to chaos. The same belief that inspires can become dogma. The same curiosity that opens minds can flee from stillness. For the Sagittarian, balance is the challenge. To keep moving without losing grounding. To keep believing without becoming blind. To keep laughing without forgetting the depth beneath the joy. But when this sign finds that balance, when its movement becomes pilgrimage and its laughter becomes prayer, Sagittarius embodies the very spirit of divine adventure. It becomes the philosopher of the heart, the teacher whose words ignite others, the wanderer whose presence reminds us that faith is not a destination, but a way of traveling through life. The truth about Sagittarius is that it seeks not just knowledge, but meaning. Not just freedom, but purpose. Its fire is not here to destroy or consume, but to guide us, to remind every soul that life is not a cage, but a vast horizon waiting to be explored. The archer's bow is drawn, the arrow gleams with intent, and the message is clear. Seek, question, wander, for the journey itself is the sacred path. The arrow of fire. This is the heart of Sagittarius, the symbol that defines its nature, the eternal gesture of motion and aim. The archer does not hold the bow idly. Every Sagittarian soul is born reaching, stretching towards something just beyond what it can touch. The bowstring trembles with potential, and the arrow gleams with longing. This is not aimless energy. It is divine curiosity made visible. For Sagittarius, to live is to draw the bow and to dare to release. The fire that fuels this arrow is sacred. It is not the blaze it consumes, but the flame that guides through darkness. Fire, in the Sagittarian sense, is not about destruction but illumination. It burns away stagnation and deceit, clearing a path for clarity. The archer knows that every shot is an act of faith. Once the arrow leaves the string, control is surrendered. Where it lands is up to the winds of fate, to the unseen hands of destiny. Yet Sagittarius never hesitates to shoot, for this sign, meaning, is not discovered by waiting, but by moving, by trusting that the act of aiming toward truth is itself a kind of devotion. Every Sagittarian carries within them an inner bow, invisible but always ready. It draws back when they yearn for something greater, when routine feels suffocating, when complacency dulls the spirit, when the world seems too small for their expanding mind. That tension builds in the heart, that sacred discomfort of knowing there is more. And when they finally let go, when they take the leap, a journey begins. A conversation deepens. A truth reveals itself. Sagittarius is the eternal student of experience, learning through every arrow loosed into the unknown. Yet this gift is double. The archer's fire can become restless, impatient, and blind to precision. Sagittarius can draw too many bows at once, aiming everywhere but nowhere. It can mistake constant motion for growth, chasing the horizon but never stopping to ask what the arrow seeks to pierce. The challenge lies not in learning how to move, but in learning where and why to move. The arrow that carries purpose becomes wisdom. The one shot in haste becomes waste. This is why Sagittarius is ruled by Jupiter, not just the planet of expansion, but of higher truth and moral vision. Jupiter reminds the archer that aim must be guided by integrity, that freedom without principle becomes chaos. Each arrow released into the world carries intention. Will it wound or awaken? Will it scatter or illuminate? Sagittarius must learn that its fire is sacred only when aligned with meaning. When the Sagittarian fire matures, it becomes the flame of the philosopher and the pilgrim. Its arrows are no longer weapons, but prayers, questions sent out into the vastness, each one asking, what is real? What is divine? What is worth living for? And in that asking, wisdom unfolds. The archer does not always need to hit the mark. Sometimes, the flight itself is the revelation. The sky becomes the teacher, the motion becomes the message, and the journey itself becomes the truth. This is the secret of the arrow of fire. It is not about the target, but about the courage to draw, the faith to release, and the wisdom to trust the wind. Sagittarius teaches us that purpose is not found in stillness, but in seeking, not in answers, but in the bravery of the question. Each soul born under this sign carries an inner arrow pointing toward the horizon, whispering endlessly, there is more. There is always more. And when that whisper becomes too strong to ignore, the Sagittarian spirit rises, bows drawn, eyes lifted to the infinite, and steps once more into the journey that never ends. Every sign in the zodiac carries a myth, a story older than language that reveals its soul. For Sagittarius, that story is written in the stars through the figure of Chiron, the wise centaur, half man, half horse, half instinct, half reason. Unlike the wild and drunken centaurs who roamed untamed, Chiron was noble, patient, and deeply conscious. He bridged the distance between the animal and the divine, the mortal and the immortal. This is the heart of Sagittarius, the sacred tension between wild freedom and higher purpose, between the earth beneath the hooves and the sky that calls above. Chiron was a teacher, healer, and philosopher. In his cave, nestled among mountains and forests. He trained heroes and demigods, Achilles, Jason, Hercules, teaching them music, medicine, ethics, and the art of living with wisdom. He was not the warrior who fought, but the one who guided those who would. His power was knowledge, and his devotion was to truth. This is why Sagittarius is the philosopher of the zodiac, restless, not for pleasure alone, but for meaning. Like Chiron, the Sagittarian spirit longs to understand the laws that govern both body and soul, earth and sky. But Chiron's story is also one of pain, the sacred wound that transforms wisdom into compassion. Struck by a poisoned arrow that could not kill him, yet would never heal, Chiron lived in eternal suffering. He possessed all the knowledge to heal others, yet could not heal himself. In this paradox lies one of the deepest truths of Sagittarius. The seeker's path is never without wounding. To search for higher truths is to encounter disappointment, loss, and the pain of disillusionment. Sagittarius learns, as Chiron did, that wisdom is not born from certainty, but from experience, often painful, always humbling. Through his suffering, Chiron developed empathy beyond measure. He became the teacher who did not preach from comfort, but from the understanding that every soul bears its own wound. Sagittarius carries this same spiritual inheritance. Beneath its joy and laughter lies a quiet sadness, a memory of the arrow that wounded its mythic ancestor. This is why Sagittarius can lift others even when it is hurting, why it seeks joy even in chaos, why it believes in meaning even when the world offers none. Its optimism is not naivete, it is rebellion against despair. It is the SOS refusal to let pain be the final word. Eventually, Chiron's compassion earned him release. He offered his immortality to free Prometheus, the bringer of fire, and was placed among the stars as the constellation Centaurus, a symbol of sacrifice and transcendence. Through that act, the myth reveals the highest potential of Sagittarius to turn its wound into wisdom, its freedom into service, its search into illumination. The Sagittarian soul is never content with small truths because it remembers, deep within, that knowledge and pain are intertwined, that every revelation costs something, and every insight demands surrender. In Chiron, we find the mirror of Sagittarius, half instinct, half reason, forever caught between heaven and earth. The horse half represents desire, adventure, and the wild call of nature. The human half represents consciousness, purpose, and philosophy. Neither can be denied. The challenge of the Sagittarian life is to reconcile these halves, to live freely without losing meaning, to think deeply without losing wonder, to run wild and still aim for the divine. When both sides move in harmony, Sagittarius becomes what Chiron embodied, the healer who teaches through experience, the philosopher who speaks from the wound, the guide whose fire lights the path for others. The myth reminds us that wisdom does not come from escaping pain, but from transforming it. Chiron's arrow is the same arrow that Sagittarius holds, one that wounds and enlightens at once. To seek truth is to be pierced by it. And yet, through that wound, light enters. The fire burns cleaner, brighter, more compassionate. This is the sacred inheritance of Sagittarius. Not just to know, but to understand. Not just to teach, but to guide. Not just to run, but to transcend. Fire is the element that defines Sagittarius. Not the flicker of a candle, nor the steady warmth of a hearth, but the living blaze of movement and expansion. It is the fire that burns on mountaintops, the flame that calls wanderers to follow it across endless horizons. Every Sagittarian carries that flame within, a light that refuses confinement. Fire is their essence and their teacher, the sacred energy that transforms thought into faith, motion into meaning, and desire into purpose. In the language of the elements, fire is the spark of life itself, the principle of inspiration, illumination, and courage. Where water feels, air thinks, and earth builds, fire belief. It moves through the world with conviction that there is something beyond what can be seen. Sagittarius, as the mutable fire sign, is the flame in constant transformation, never content to burn in one place for long, always seeking new fuel in new ideas, new experiences, new truths. This is not instability. It is the nature of exploration. Just as a flame dances and shifts but never forgets its source, the Sagittarian soul travels widely but is always seeking the same thing, meaning this fire grants vision. The Sagittarian does not merely see what is, they sense what could be. They are driven by glimpses of a larger pattern, the whisper of destiny in the wind. Their intuition often outpaces logic, for they feel the pulse of possibilities long before they can explain them. This visionary quality is why Sagittarius is both philosopher and prophet, one who not only asks questions, but also glimpses the horizon of answers yet to be named. Their words carry conviction because they come from fire, from the deep, burning, knowing that truth is alive, evolving, and divine. But fire, if untempered, can consume. Sagittarius must learn that the gift of vision carries responsibility. A flame that burns too fiercely can blind rather than enlighten. The desire for expansion can become excess. The quest for truth can turn into the worship of one's own ideas. Fire demands reverence. It must be tended with wisdom, allowed to shine but never to scorch. When Sagittarius grounds its fire in humility, it becomes a light that guides others through darkness. When it loses balance, that same fire can ignite chaos, leaving behind the ashes of unkept promises and unfinished journeys. Yet fire always forgives. It burns, it consumes, and it renews. The Sagittarian path is cyclical. Each mistake, each burst of flame that dies too soon, becomes fuel for deeper wisdom. They learn that fire must breathe, that passion without reflection fades, that faith without focus disperses. When they integrate the lesson, their fire becomes sacred, no longer the wildfire of rebellion, but the eternal flame of purpose. The gift of Sagittarius fire is vision born of faith. Faith not in dogma or authority, but in life's capacity to reveal itself through experience. The Sagittarian does not require proof to believe. They believe because belief itself is the bridge to discovery. Their trust in the universe is their compass. They may stumble, but they trust that each misstep is part of a greater unfolding. Their laughter is not frivolous. It is the sound of a soul that knows the fire never dies. To walk with Sagittarius is to walk in the presence of that fire. You feel it when they speak of the future, when they look at the stars, when they stand before the unknown and smile. Their eyes carry the glint of the eternal flame, the promise that knowledge is never static, that understanding is an ever-widening circle of light. In their presence, others remember that wisdom is not a destination, but a process, a living fire passed from one soul to another across time and experience. This is the gift of Sagittarius, to remind us that within every human heart burns a spark of divine vision, a flame that seeks, learns, and grows brighter with every truth it dares to touch. It is the fire that moves the world forward, the blaze that turns ordinary life into sacred journey. And even when the path darkens, when doubt chills the bones, Sagittarius whispers the ancient promise of its element. Light returns, always. Sagittarius is ruled by Jupiter, the great planet of expansion, the cosmic lawgiver, the bringer of truth, the guardian of divine order in a chaotic universe, where Mercury rules the mind and Venus rules the heart. Jupiter governs meaning. It is the voice that whispers through every Sagittarian soul. There is purpose in everything. Seek it. Under this planet's vast and generous influence, Sagittarius becomes the philosopher of the zodiac, not because it studies the world, but because it feels its patterns in the marrow of its being. It sees the invisible threads that bind events, people, and destinies together. To understand Sagittarius, one must understand Jupiter's gift and challenge. Jupiter is the law of growth, physical, spiritual, intellectual. It urges expansion of the self beyond limitation, beyond fear, beyond what is known. Its nature is abundance, optimism, faith in life's unfolding. The Sagittarian spirit carries this in its blood. It believes that life, even in its darkest moments, is guided by wisdom. It trusts the process, even when it cannot see where the road leads. This faith is not always religious, but it is sacred nonetheless. It is faith in meaning itself, faith that the universe, however wild, moves toward purpose. But every law of light has its shadow. Jupiter's expansion can become excess. The same cosmic force that teaches Sagittarius to seek truth can lead it to overreach, overindulge, it can inflate ideals until they burst under the weight of reality. Sagittarius must learn that cosmic law is not about unending growth, but about balance, about understanding that expansion without reflection is chaos, and optimism without discipline becomes delusion. The wisdom of Jupiter is vastness with purpose, joy with humility, faith with discernment. In ancient traditions, Jupiter was seen as the divine judge, not in the sense of punishment, but as the force that ensures harmony in the great pattern of existence. For Sagittarius, this becomes an inner voice, the conscience that weighs its choices, the intuition that senses when it is aligned with truth or lost in false brightness. The Sagittarian fire feels this law as a rhythm, a moral pulse that beats in time with the cosmos. It is why this sign often carries a strong sense of justice, a desire to defend the underdog, to speak for what feels right even when the world laughs. It is not rebellion for rebellion's sake. It is Jupiter's law echoing in a mortal heart. The cosmic law that guides Sagittarius is also the law of synchronicity, the belief that nothing is coincidence, that signs and symbols are the language of the divine. A Sagittarian who walks with awareness begins to see patterns everywhere, a book that falls open to the right passage, a stranger's words that answer an unspoken question, a journey that begins as accident and ends as revelation. To them, the universe speaks constantly, and when they listen, their faith becomes unshakable. Yet the truest wisdom of Jupiter is humility before mystery. No matter how vast its understanding grows, Sagittarius must remember that the cosmos is larger still. The sign's temptation is to become the preacher who believes they know divine law better than anyone. But Jupiter's laughter is gentle and infinite. It reminds Sagittarius that even the wisest teacher is still a student, that the universe cannot be mastered, only danced with. The greatest truth of the cosmic law is this: everything expands toward love, and love itself expands without end. When Sagittarius surrenders to that truth, its fire aligns perfectly with Jupiter's rhythm. It stops trying to control meaning and begins to embody it. Its words become blessings, its laughter becomes teaching, and its movement becomes prayer. The Sagittarian who lives in harmony with cosmic law becomes a radiant force of inspiration, not preaching, but living example, not claiming to know, but embodying faith in every breath. Jupiter's law is not carved in stone. It is written in the stars, in rivers, in the turning of the earth. Sagittarius reads that law through experience, through trust, through... Its task is not to obey it blindly, but to live in conversation with it, to let the fire of freedom and the wisdom of faith move together as one. When this happens, Sagittarius becomes what it was always meant to be, not the restless wanderer, but the cosmic traveler, one who understands that every step, every word, every act of courage ripples across the universe as part of something infinitely divine. The path of the wanderer is the road that Sagittarius was born to walk, a journey that is not only physical but profoundly spiritual. To live as a Sagittarian soul is to feel a constant pull toward the horizon, to sense that every ending is simply another beginning, and that home is not a place but a state of being. The world calls, not as a distraction, but as a mirror. Every road, every conversation, every sunrise over a foreign land becomes a reflection of the self, a way for the seeker to understand their own nature through the endless variety of existence. The Sagittarian wanderer is driven by an ache that others may mistake for restlessness. But it is not mere wanderlust, it is spiritual hunger. There is something within this soul that remembers the vastness of existence, the boundless freedom of the spirit before it entered flesh. To live as Sagittarius is to forever try to reconcile that memory with the human condition. Movement becomes meditation, exploration becomes prayer. Every journey, no matter how mundane, becomes a pilgrimage towards something greater. In the ancient world, Sagittarius would have been the traveler between temples, the philosopher walking barefoot through cities and deserts, collecting wisdom like fire from every culture and faith. Even now, this sign feels most alive when crossing boundaries: geographical, intellectual, emotional. The Sagittarian learns by immersion, by experience, by participation in life's great unfolding. They trust the road more than the map. They know that truth cannot be contained in one doctrine, one teacher, one tradition. The universe is too vast for that. So they listen to wind, to people, to intuition, allowing the journey itself to teach them what the books cannot. But the path of the wanderer is not without cost. To live in motion means to leave things behind. Relationships, roots, and stability often become the sacrifices demanded by freedom. The Sagittarian heart is generous but struggles with permanence, torn between love of the moment and the hunger for the next. They may promise forever, meaning it deeply, yet when the call of the horizon returns, they must answer. The road is both blessing and burden. It gives everything but takes much in return. The greatest lesson for the Sagittarian wanderer is to discover that the journey is not only outward, but inward. The horizon they chase in the world mirrors the horizon within that distant glow of truth, purpose, and divine connection. There comes a time when every Sagittarius must pause, look up at the stars, and realize that the freedom they've sought is already inside them. When they stop running from and begin traveling with intention, the road becomes sacred. Every step turns into ceremony, every destination into reflection. It is in this realization that the wanderer transforms into the pilgrim. The pilgrim does not move to escape, but to understand. They no longer fear stillness because they carry the horizon within their heart. Their fire ceases to scatter. It begins to guide. Their laughter, once wild and untethered, becomes soft and knowing, the sound of one who has finally made peace with the mystery they can never fully name. The path of the wanderer also teaches that faith is not built in temples, but in the spaces between them, in the quiet of early mornings, in the vast silence of mountains, in the eyes of strangers met on the road. For Sagittarius, the divine reveals itself in motion, in the unpredictable beauty of life unfolding without control. They come to understand that God, the universe, the great mystery, whatever name one gives it, is not a fixed presence waiting at the end of the journey. It is the wind itself, the path itself, the act of walking itself. When Sagittarius embraces this truth, their movement becomes meaningful. Their freedom becomes sacred, and their heart, once restless, finds belonging in the boundless. The road no longer leads away from home, it becomes home, and wherever they go, they bring with them that rare light. The light of those who have seen the world not with their eyes alone, but with the fire of their soul. Laughter is one of Sagittarius's purest forms of magic. Beneath the boldness of the seeker and the intensity of the philosopher lies a secret alchemy. Humor as holy fire. The Sagittarian soul understands, perhaps better than any other, that laughter is not the denial of pain, but the transformation of it. A way to keep the spirit free even when the body is weary. Their humor is not carelessness. It is wisdom in disguise. It is how they remind themselves and others that the universe is not cruel, only vast, and that within that vastness, joy is the only way to stay light enough to keep walking. The sacred humor of Sagittarius is born from perspective. This sign sees life from the height of the mountaintop, where all things, sorrow and triumph, gain and loss, blend into a single, wondrous pattern. To them, the world is a story being told by something infinite, and they are both the listener and the punchline. That awareness makes them laugh at what others take too seriously. Their laughter carries an echo of faith, the certainty that nothing is final, not even despair. It is a rebellion against the heaviness that tries to trap the human heart. In ancient times, the philosophers of fire, those ruled by Jupiter, were known to mix wisdom with jest. They believed that humor could open the soul where argument could not. Sagittarius carries this same gift. They disarm with warmth, teach through play, and illuminate truths through exaggeration and paradox. When they speak, their words often sparkle with irony and insight, reminding those who listen that enlightenment need not be solemn. The divine can be found in the absurd, in the cosmic joke that holds the universe together. Yet this humor, like all fire, must be tended. When Sagittarius laughs too loudly, it can wound. When they turn wit into defense, it hardens into their shadow laughs to avoid feeling, to escape the weight of empathy. It's the humor that runs ahead of healing, the joke that hides the ache. But when they learn to laugh with, not it, when they allow humor to heal rather than deflect, their laughter becomes sacred again. A prayer rising on the breath, a sound that keeps despair from taking root. This is why others are drawn to the Sagittarian flame. Their joy is contagious, their optimism an antidote to fear. They can walk into the darkest room and still find something to smile about, not because they are blind to the dark, but because they understand that light always returns. Their laughter becomes a torch others follow. It says, yes, it hurts. Yes, it's uncertain, but still, life is good. Life is meaningful. Life is worth the next step. In their company, others remember how to hope. Humor, for Sagittarius, is also humility. It is the recognition that even wisdom is fallible, that the universe often laughs last. The Sagittarian soul learns that to laugh at oneself is a form of freedom, the kind that unchains the ego and makes space for truth. When they laugh, it is not from superiority but from surrender, an acknowledgement that they too are part of the great mystery, stumbling like everyone else, guided by sparks of grace in the dark. In the sacred humor of Sagittarius, there is healing. The fire that once burned with impatience now burns with warmth. The seeker who once fled from pain now embraces it, turning suffering into story, story into laughter, and laughter into light. Their joy becomes medicine, not a distraction from truth, but its very expression. For Sagittarius knows that laughter, when born of love and awareness, is not its copy. It is enlightenment. This is their gift to the world, to remind us that the path is lighter when walked with laughter, that wisdom without joy becomes arrogance, and that faith without play loses its heartbeat. In a universe that is both beautiful and brutal, the Sagittarian fire teaches us to keep smiling at the stars, to keep laughing through the storms, and to trust that somewhere, beyond all reason, the cosmos laughs with us.